they call Chelsea iconic. High fashion, blue plaques, sharp terraces, and a rent roll that makes hedge funds jealous. But behind the store windows, the cobbles and the cafes, is a quieter dynasty, the Cadogans, and at the center of its newest chapter stands Edward Cadogan, a former raftman turned steward of 93 acres that are, in many ways, the blueprint for modern urban aristocracy. This is a story that starts centuries ago with a marriage and a map, and shows how one family turned an estate into an empire, and how Edward, the ninth Earl Cadogan, became the steward of that empire in an age that prizes both legacy and profit. To understand Edward's rise, you need to understand the asset, the Cadogan Estate. It's not a single building or a single block. It's 93 acres of prime central London, streets you've walked down, stores you window shopped in, and buildings you might never notice, but whose leases quietly determine what happens on the high street. For the Cadogans, this land wasn't speculation, it was stewardship. Over centuries, the family stitched together an ownership pattern that today reads like a map of British luxury retail. That concentrated ownership is the seed of a fortune that, when tended well, grows with every global brand that wants an Sloane Street shopfront. Edward Charles Cadogan was born into that story in 1966, but his first headline wasn't in property. After school, he traded town for uniform and joined the Royal Air Force. He served for more than a decade, postings that included Germany, Cyprus, and Canada, and later kept his links with service by joining the Territorial Army and commanding a Scottish Reserve Battalion. That military chapter shaped him. Discipline, chain of command, and a taste for quiet responsibility. Qualities that would later make him a conservative steward more comfortable with long plans than flashy turnovers. When his father, Charles Cadogan, passed the day-to-day reins of the family business to his son in 2012, it wasn't an abrupt takeover so much as a generational handover. Edward became chairman of Cadogan Estates at a time when the UK property market was complicated. Post-financial crisis recovery, political noise, and shoppers forming new habits thanks to the internet. What he inherited was an asset base anchored in Chelsea and Knightsbridge, exceptional real estate, and a reputation for long-term thinking. But land alone doesn't print cash. Edward's job was to turn stewardship into a sustainable, modern business. How do you make billions out of streets and terraces? You do four things well. You curate the tenant mix, you invest in place, you pivot into higher return uses, and you play the long tax and planning game better than others. First, tenant curation. Under Edward's chairmanship, Cadogan doubled down on attracting global lifestyle and luxury brands that are willing to pay premiums for the prestige of a Chelsea address. That means not simply renting space, but grooming a retail ecosystem where boutiques, cafes, and galleries feed off each other, and where footfall becomes a selling point. Retailers pay for that curated gravity. The estate collects rents that are far above the national average. Second, place investment. Cadogan has invested in the public realm, repaving streets, improving lighting, creating better pedestrian spaces. Those are the visible moves you feel when you stroll Sloane Street, the subtle upgrades that make a district more desirable and justify higher rental yields. Unlike a short-term landlord, Edward's approach leans into public improvements that make the whole neighborhood more valuable over decades. Third, diversification into higher-yield assets. Cadogan Estates under Edward hasn't been afraid to experiment. Boutique hotels, hospitality partnerships, and more active management of restaurants and leisure spaces. Moving from passive landlord to operator in select areas means capturing a bigger slice of the value chain and higher returns when those projects succeed. Fourth, quiet financial engineering. The Cadogans run parts of their holdings through long-standing trusts and structures designed for the long haul. That stability lets them resist pressured sales and time investments to market cycles. In times when other landlords must refinance or sell, a family that can wait and invest counter-cyclically often wins. All of these moves add up. In recent years, Cadogan Estates has reported record profits and rising portfolio values, a sign that a carefully curated neighborhood can remain one of the world's most desirable retail addresses, even as shopping habits evolve. Those headline numbers, rising rents, growing operating profits, and a multi-billion-pound portfolio are the reason the family sits near the top of Britain's wealth lists. But the real moral of the story isn't just land equals money. It's that a disciplined approach to place, a willingness to invest in the long term, and a shrewd mix of conservatism and selective innovation can turn inherited land into a generational fortune. Edward's personality matters here. He is the sort of chairman who prefers a well-told annual report to a viral interview. His military background is mirrored in the way he runs the estate: steady, strategic, and team-oriented. That temperament also surfaces in his public roles: trusteeships, charity posts, and a preference for community projects that reinforce the neighborhood's social fabric. He's visible in Chelsea, but not celebrity visible. His is an old money style of prominence, influence shown by what you keep in good repair, by whom you invite into your streets, and how you handle the inevitable tensions between residents, retailers, and the council. That tension is instructive. Running a 93-acre estate in metropolitan London means balancing resident interests with the desires of global brands, managing conservation areas, negotiating planning restrictions, and occasionally weathering press criticism about exclusivity. For any modern peer, the political and social expectations are different than they were for 18th century landlords. To keep Chelsea desirable, you must be community-minded and commercially adept, and Edward's leadership has been about striking that balance. Critics sometimes frame such estates as anachronisms, relics of a class system where concentration of land equals entrenched wealth. But what the Cadogan story shows is adaptability, a lineage that survived by evolving. The family didn't simply hold land, they developed and reoriented it across centuries. Their secret wasn't hoarding, but thoughtful development. Townhouses when townhouses were novel, retail when shopping streets mattered, office space when central London needed it. Today's innovations, hotels, curated retail, are just the latest moves on a long chessboard. How did Edward become a billionaire? Strictly speaking, Edward Cadogan is part of a family wealth structure. The riches flow from multi-generational land ownership, carefully managed corporate vehicles, and a disciplined dividend policy. By converting the value of prime central London real estate into sustainable rental streams, securing premium tenants, and investing in the estate's public realm, the Cadogans preserve and increase value while paying themselves conservatively. Think of it like compound interest, but applied to streets and shop fronts. Steady improvements and thoughtful leasing decisions multiply value over decades. There's also an inheritance effect. Edward stepped into the chairmanship in 2012 and inherited the earldom and the formal stewardship in 2023. Passing the baton from his father meant he was able to combine the experience of the older generation with his own operational instincts. That blend, old wisdom, plus a newer willingness to do hands-on projects like hotels, is why the family's financial performance has strengthened in recent reports. But the human bits matter too. Edward's military past gives him an unshowy charisma. His charitable work signals a desire to make the estate socially sustainable, not just lucrative. To neighbors, he's a local figure, a man who cares about the parish, the pavement, and the long-term picture. To international brands, he's a reliable partner who can deliver premium space in a brand-safe environment. To the financial world, he's the steward of a rare, irreplaceable asset. And yes, there are complications. London's property market is buffeted by interest rates, foreign buyer sentiment, and shifting retail patterns. A landlord who owns a high concentration of retail space must constantly adapt to brands that reimagine physical stores as experience centers, pop-ups, or hybrid digital showrooms. Edward's response has been to lean into quality, not chasing every tenant, but ensuring the ones that come in add prestige, footfall, and complementary services. There's a little bit of theater to this too. Chelsea is a stage and Cadogan the director, which lights to dim, which storefronts to spotlight, where to build a hotel, where to preserve a terrace. The decisions are both economic and aesthetic. When that choreography works, property values rise. When it doesn't, vacancy and controversy creep in. So the chair's most important tool is judgment, the kind that comes from boots on the pavement and a spreadsheet on the desk. So what is Edward Cadogan's legacy so far? He has modernized stewardship without shedding stewardship's responsibilities. He has nudged one of Britain's great estates toward hospitality and active management while keeping the traditional thread, long-term care of buildings and public spaces. In the process, he has overseen record profits and a rising valuation of the estate, protecting a family fortune accumulated over 3 centuries. For a YouTube audience, this is irresistible because it's both old world and hyper-relevant. It's aristocracy that runs like a corporation. It's real estate that behaves like a tech product, carefully curated, constantly iterated, and sold on lifestyle rather than square footage alone. Edward Cadogan's story also forces us to ask sharper questions about urban ownership in the 21st century. Who shapes our high streets? How do we balance public access with private profit? And what does stewardship mean when your asset is a neighborhood that millions pass through every year? In the small human moments, the tale is simple. A son who learned command in the Air Force, who returned to a place he loves, and who now faces a modern job, keeping Chelsea special for residents, irresistible to premium brands, and profitable for the family that steered it for generations. He stands in a long line of Cadogans, but his era will be judged by how well he navigates the twin demands of community and commerce. If you want a final image, picture Sloane Street at twilight, soft lights on a boutique window, pedestrians in elegant coats, and somewhere above it, the quiet ledger of leases and maintenance schedules that keep that picture intact. That ledger is the modern estate. Edward Cadogan holds the pen. And whether you cheer or jeer, you can't deny the result, a corner of London that still looks and feels the way the world expects Chelsea to feel. Curated, expensive, and very, very well kept.